Camera speeds.
Scene one baker. Scene one baker. Take one. Flying in the slate.
Right.
Got it?
Yep. Perfect. All right, go ahead.
One baker. Take one. Mark.
Caroline, thank you for doing the interview.
Glad to do it.
I've been asking everybody to tell me a story about Maynard. Tell me a story about your brother.
Okay, I am Maynard's younger sister, little sister, right under him. So I caught hell. He loved to play jokes and tricks, and he just got a great joy out of that. I usually went, Mama, Maynard just so and so and so. So that would just double his pleasure, right? But we had kind of an adversarial relationship, but he would lay down his life for me, and I knew it. When we got older, especially up in high school and college, he was extremely protective of me, especially when I started dating or trying to. He made it hard. At home, if I had a young man coming to see me, he would be there at the door to answer it. Nobody asked him to, but he had to look him over and see what was what, right? But I think Maynard and I had a beautiful relationship because he was very protective of me. And my father had died, our father had died when I was only 11. So he filled that role for me, and that was very important. So I got a two-in-one, a brother and a father, and that made our relationship very special. You gonna mess with me now, because I get misty about talking about it. I think throughout our lives, we maintained that relationship.
So you must have been really very proud of him when he became the first mayor of Atlanta.
Overwhelmed, very proud, but I totally expected him to do something like that.
Why?
Because he was of that ilk, he had that caliber, his articulation even just told you that he was going to be somebody great. The way he spoke, the way he thought, he had a brilliant mind, brilliant. The fact that he went into Morehouse at 14 was saying something, but the fact that he went into Morehouse and shone really told you something. So it was not unexpected, but it was a joy to see that fulfillment of his capabilities. Yeah.
And he was, in some ways, like your dad. He was like a preacher, right?
Definitely. As a matter of fact, Maynard and I had a conversation one time in which he told me he was deliberating between going into politics and going into the ministry. And I said, I don't know if I can tell this part.
You can tell it.
I said, no, I didn't mean that way. I just meant emotionally.
Oh.
And I said to him, of course you can. Put me back on track. Whether he would go into the ministry or into politics.
Yes, ma'am.
I asked him that one time. And he said, no, I don't want to go into the ministry. And I said, why not? He said, because it was so devastating to our father. And it really was. So he chose what he felt he could handle. He said, I remember he said this, I'm still going to serve the people. Either way. so I can do it this way.
What was it like for you, both and your other siblings, when your father passed away?
Well, I was 11, so I was old enough to understand it. We had two younger ones, down to 3 years old, who didn't quite perceive what that meant. I was intensely close to my daddy. I was his little brat. So it devastated me. It really devastated me. Maynard, I must say, was able to pull himself together and become the man of the household, if you will. As a matter of fact, he over-assumed the position and got on our nerves most of the time.
Being both a big brother and
Oh, he just, boy, you know, he man of the house. But it was very devastating for our father to have died. The baby was 3. The oldest, I think, was 18. And when you thought about my mother raising these 6 children by herself, except that we always have to give credit to our grandfather and especially our Aunt Netta Wilder. Everybody helped, but they held it together, even financially. Now, they just picked my mama up and just carried her forward, you know. They weren't going to let our education slip or anything. I mean, even to the emotional holding on and helping us, that was there too. So they did a great job.
what do you remember about your grandfather?
My grandfather? Everything.
Tell me about
That
it.
was John Wesley Dobbs, JWD. He had it inscribed on everything. He grew up poor. His mother raised him and didn't have much at all. He used to my mama said some of these tales were enhanced, but he used to tell us how he was so ignorant of things that he would take the candy wrapper and put it in his mouth and throw the candy away. Now, you know, it was an exaggeration, but anyhow, he didn't have anything growing up as a child except determination. That's what he had. And he taught that. He taught it to his children and to his grandchildren. It was a gift. It really was. And he didn't have anything. He talked about how he didn't have shoes, he didn't have clothes. You know, his mother was raising him by herself, and he was determined to achieve.
And he did.
And who did he ever? And people would never have thought, hearing Grandpa talk as a grown man, that he didn't finish his education. He went to Morehouse for 2 years, but he had to drop out. And so he did. That's one thing about him. Anything he had to do for his family took priority over everything. So he didn't finish. They gave him an honorary degree years later. But he was so educated. And when I saw him get his education, he had every book you could name that he could afford. And he'd go in there and read. Just read all the time. And anywhere that he could gather knowledge in any piece of education, he would grab it. He was just absolutely hungry for education and to spread it. So he was definitely a deep student and a teacher.
And a pillar of the community, right?
Absolutely. Everybody respected him. And he had this really proud look and walk when he went down the street. It was not accidental or incidental that people admired him. He put it out there. It was sort of like, you better. Here comes John Wesley Dobbs, you know. But I don't mean to make it sound as if he expected to be admired for not doing anything. He knew he deserved to be admired, and he gathered that admiration and accepted it.
And he was a Mason too, right?
And he was a Mason, not just a Mason. He was a 33rd degree. He was a Grand Master. You can't get no upper than that. That's the top of the line. And he was a devout Mason. I mean, nothing made him prouder than to put on his regalia and to march in all those different marches they had. And he recruited his grandsons, Maynard included. My daddy was a Mason. You really didn't come into the Dobbs family a male and not become a Mason. You really didn't get away with that.
Tell us about your dad being a preacher and how, charismatic he was.
He was a dream of a man.
Maynard Ferguson Sr.,
Maynard
Maynard Jackson.
Hallbrook Jackson Sr., right. I know who Maynard Ferguson is. Right. Anyway, Maynard Hallbrook Jackson Sr., minister, our father, elegant man, came up from New Orleans to Morehouse. His mama had silk dinner napkins and stuff in his suitcase. And he came from a very, not necessarily super wealthy, but an extremely refined family, very cultured. And it just showed in him, but he was not stuffy. No. Very down to earth. Super handsome. I mean, Maynard had nothing on my dad. My dad was a handsome man. And the minute he saw my mama, they just clicked together and never parted again. I mean, that was one of those, I don't know the word for it, I can't get, like electric meetings. And the love between them was very deep. And I tell you something else about my daddy. With 6 kids, he did not let that mess with his romance with my mother. He was a very romantic man. He sang and played the piano, and so did she. They did love songs at the piano. They went to movie dates together. He would not let 6 kids interrupt his love, romantic love, for his wife.
That's nice.
Oh, very much so.
He sounds like he was a very sensitive man.
He was, and his great example, Maynard was a very romantic man. He got it dead from my daddy.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Could you talk about the accident that your dad had?
Yeah, I was in the car.
Tell us.
Hard to talk about. A white cop. We're talking about a black preacher in southwest Atlanta back in, do you have the year?
What year was it?
The 50s, something. In a bad year, still bad, super bad for blacks. At Washington High School on Hunter Road. We call it Martin Luther King now or something else. Anyway, there was a curve around the field, the football field. And my daddy was about to turn left up, I think that was called White House or something, Washington High, sat right on that street. He was going up there to pick up my sister Jean, who was born with a bad heart. So her education took some catch up because she had to be in the hospital a lot. So he was making a left to pick her up from summer school. And this white cop came around that field curve at Washington High and slammed his motorcycle dead into the front of my daddy's car. My daddy put his brakes on when he saw him coming. He anticipated, and the cop just slammed right into daddy's car, and it severed his leg, severed the motorcycle cop's leg. They took my daddy to court. He went through all kinds of hell, and he had a nervous breakdown behind it. He just had a nervous breakdown. Never came out of it. Because, being a man of God, he could not bring himself to accept doing this to another human being. It was against all of his principles to maim somebody. Never got over the responsibility of that. Had a nervous breakdown, never came out of it, physically developed double pneumonia. And that's what he died from. But he died of a broken heart, that this could happen and that he could be responsible for that cop's undoing. And of course, it devastated my mother. She not only had lost the love of her life, because they were intensely in love, but there she was facing raising 6 kids by herself. And she couldn't fathom that. Very difficult. She's a very strong woman.
But she
She
strong,
stepped in there and did it.
and had strong family support.
Yeah. Her father, her mother, sisters, all of them pitched in and helped with us, you know.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Your brother's the mayor of Atlanta. Did he confide in you when he had issues and difficulties while he was
Yes.
mayor? Tell us about some of the times
Well,
he talked to you.
I'd have to call names. I don't want to do that.
You can. We can cut it out.
Oh, you are so nosy. You want to get the nitty gritty. Let me see. I've forgotten so much of it. I'm going through terrible forgetfulness.
What about when he had to deal with the Atlanta child murders?
Oh, okay. Well, that was devastating to him too. I keep using this word, devastating in his life. But that was very devastating. He wanted to blame himself.
Why?
He kept saying, Caroline, every time I go away, another one gets murdered. I feel like it's my fault. I got to stay here and make sure they're safe. I mean, rationally, you know he couldn't do that. He knew he couldn't do that. But it just seemed to be some kind of consolation to him to say that and to do it. But he blamed himself for it.
And he must have also worried about, having Buzzy, having a son himself.
Exactly. Definitely. He was intensely worried about Buzzy in that case. He put him under extra security. Because he always had security when he was in office. He put him under extra security. Not just Buzzy, but all of his children, It was a harrowing experience, and for which he blamed himself.
Were you surprised when he decided, after running for 2 terms as mayor, and then Andy Young was mayor for 2 terms, were you surprised when Maynard decided he wanted to run a 3rd term as mayor?
No.
Why not?
Nobody was ever surprised at Maynard doing anything political. No. First of all, Maynard had a lot of courage. He had a lot of courage, a lot of guts. He got that from my mother, and what few years he had under my father. My father was a very courageous person. My mother was hell on wheels, because when she lost my father, whom she just devoutly loved, that was enough to tear her up. But then when she moved out of her grief into the thought that she had to raise these 6 children by herself, that was more than a notion. And my grandfather, John Wesley Dobbs, was a tremendous help in her life. I'm talking about courage, yes, money-wise, but courage-wise and encouragement-wise. He was just a tremendous force, tremendous inspiration to her. She was just very strong. She knew what she had to do. She knew she had 6 children to raise. We did what we were supposed to do. She laid it out. Do it. She would help us. She would encourage us. She was a very intelligent woman. Very intelligent. Not just in French, but in life. And in education in general. And she knew what to do. And she got us to do it.
You must have all been very proud when Maynard went to Morehouse at 14.
Yeah.
But that must have been difficult, a 14-year-old going to college.
Not for him.
No?
He couldn't have done, he was in 4 foundation scholarship. And you had to be around in that special age group to qualify. So it was expected. I mean, he was brilliant. He was in the age group. And, of course, my grandpa just bragged his britches off. My grandpa was very braggadocious, John Wesley Dobbs. And he was extremely proud of him. But he just went on in. We weren't scared for him, no. And he did what he needed to do.
I know educationally he was probably really good, but he got maturity-wise.
Well, that's the one area in which we were somewhat skeptical, and we're just a little bit because, Maynard was tall for his age, and these grown women, these 18-year-old women were hitting on this 14-year-old boy, and my mama was about to have a hissy fit, especially about that, yeah. But he made it on through, but that was the one ticklish point, the emotional maturity that he lacked at that age, yeah.
I was talking to your aunt the other day, June Butts, and she was talking about how Maynard was making cookies at 4 years old. He loved to eat, huh?
Yeah. Are you kidding? That was the greatest pastime of his life. He really did. He loved food and devoured it. Never got tired of eating. Of course, when he got grown and had put on so much weight, it was a detriment to his health. And he was forever fighting that battle. It was a battle for him because he just loved food.
Yeah, I saw some footage recently where he looked really thin. I think it was after he met Valerie.
That's right. That was a thin stage in his life. He was svelte. He looked really good. And but after he married Valerie, and she was a pretty good cook, then he began to eat again. Yeah, he could. But he had, for a few years, when he was a bachelor, he was slim, looked really handsome, and was almost on the verge of being cocky. He looked so good, because, that was the one drawback with Maynard. People kidding him about being so fat and pudgy and all of that. He grew up in his childhood with those kinds of people, with people poking fun at him about that kind of thing, So he was touchy about it.
Right.
So when he became all handsome and slim and had a bunch of pretty women liking him, he almost didn't know what to do with himself.
What'd you say to your brother when
Well, I never chastised him for feeling that way because I was so glad that he was looking that way. I understood what it meant to him emotionally, Mm-hmm. We teased him about the ladies, just in general, But we were glad to see it.
Were you happy that after that 3rd term he decided not to run for a 4th term as mayor?
Yeah.
Why?
Health. Didn't need the stress. Just didn't need the stress. He had been through that murdered and missing thing. murdered and missing children, and that was devastating. And he had a lot of stress in his various mayorships. So when he finally decided not to run, I was glad, because I thought health-wise he needed to kind of slow down.
He had bypasses by then, right?
Yes, yes, and he did. And his doctor told him to avoid stress. Sometimes Maynard listens, sometimes he doesn't. And he listened that time. He did listen. But hey, when you make a call, he calls.
Right.
That's the bottom line. But he had done so much service in his lifetime. I guess it was just his time.
Do you remember the day? Where were you the day that Maynard passed?
I probably could remember that day, but my memory is very bad right now. I vaguely remember someone coming to get me and telling me, I can't remember who that was. But somebody came to me where I was. I was teaching French at the time, so it must have been at Morehouse. Somebody came to me and got me and told me that Maynard had passed. Of course, I was devastated. I was right below Maynard.
Right.
We were buddies.
What,
We were
3 year
real
difference,
buddies.
4 year difference?
3.5 years difference. We were tight buddies. So I was devastated.
What is Maynard's legacy to the city of Atlanta?
I want to do a different legacy first,
Sure.
which is his legacy to young people, and specifically to young black people. Because at 14 years old, he didn't think twice about stepping into a powerful challenge, you know? And I think that's what we have to learn. Don't be afraid. You got what it takes. Go ahead and use it. I think that was his first legacy. And then, especially the young black people, we need to have the courage to do what we need to do. But I think his legacy to Atlanta, oh my God, where would you start? There was so much even physically, and my memory's not gonna there was so much physical legacy. He just built the city up. He gave it class. He definitely gave it class. And organization, culture, big time, big time. He developed it culturally. He came from a highly cultured family. And after my father passed, my mother was right there. I mean, she was there all the time, but she stepped in and played a role and taught him to be refined and be cultured and reach out and find the more cultured things in life that are important.
It makes me ask you, my next question would be, in terms of what he did in making this city an international city, what was the Atlanta you remember growing up as a child? What was Atlanta like growing up?
Atlanta was like a somewhat cultivated country town. And Maynard really, really did refine it. I mean, he really did. He just added refinement and culture and strength. It became a powerful city. It was not like that. When I was growing up, let me see if I can give you an example. Okay, when I was growing up, for us to go from our house on Sunset Avenue to my grandpa's house, 540 Houston Street, over there in front of Howard High School. To make that trek took about an hour. We didn't have expressways. We didn't have any of that. When Maynard came into office, now Inman and myself did a good bit physically, but when Maynard came into office, Maynard had refinement, and he knew how to do the practical things that would allow you to not just cultivate a city. Well, cultivate it, yes, but cultivate it not only in the cultural sense, but also in the physical and practical sense. So what he didn't know how to do, he knew how to get the people in there to do it. And he loved to organize and push people to do whatever it took to fulfill his vision.
He was a leader.
Yeah, he wasn't going to give up on his vision.
Yeah, he was a leader. He had a vision. Yeah.
Right. And he had the gusto and the deep voice and the whole, what's the word I don't know?
Package.
Yeah, to do that. People listened to Maynard's voice, you know. It impacted people. Yeah.
Great. Wendy?
Bless you.
Bless you.
Oh,
Huh?
I got a little story or two out of you. How about maybe when he was coming of age, out of the adolescent stage?
Out of the what stage?
Adolescent.
How about
Our adolescent
when he was
stage.
coming out of, he's at Morehouse at 14, feeling awkward.
Yeah.
You know, maybe let's think
Yeah.
sophomore, junior, senior year at
Yeah,
Morehouse.
yeah, when he, well, you know, that was prominent, Buzzy. That's a really good
Caroline, talk to
era.
you.
That was a really good era, prominent in his life because he was so much younger. And it especially impacted him socially. There were things that he almost wouldn't be allowed to do at home that his size dictated that he should be doing. So with him being 6 foot some odd at that time and a big guy, you know, and being in college ahead of himself, he would try to hit on the ladies, but socially, he was not eligible.
Yeah, not sophisticated.
Not sophisticated enough to do that. I'm sure he got his feelings hurt from time to time because when he tried to come into a conversation or a union or whatever, emotionally, he couldn't catch up to it. Yeah.
But
He's a just a good old country boy of sorts. Like, huh.
Well,
Can you
he
talk-
was young. Can what?
Can you talk about when he went to pick tobacco?
Yeah, he and
Oh, yes, Lord.
Pete,
that
Pete
was a-
Chittard,
Huh?
his best friend, Pete
Pete
Chittard.
Chittard, that's right. His best friend, Peter Chittard, was from New Orleans. And they were at Morehouse. Both of them had entered that Ford Foundation early entrant scholarship thing. And for the summer, my grandpa, because my father was deceased by then, but for the summer, my grandpa and my mother let Maynard go to, I think it was Connecticut, to a tobacco farm. This was a college program. They had a lot of guys going from the colleges to pick tobacco, and they'd make money for the summer, you know. But what did you want me to talk about?
Like
Oh,
maybe-
I know. wait a minute.
Whatever.
I know what I was gonna say. It was a disaster for Maynard. He came home with his knees infected. When you pick tobacco, you got to get down on your knees, and the better leaves are at the bottom. And he came home with infected knees not 2 weeks into the episode, which was supposed to be a summer-long thing. And my grandpa was kind of disappointed, you know, but my mama was glad he came home. You know, a mama doesn't want her boy's knees to be skin up. Yeah.
Can you recall when he started to get a little bit more sophisticated and able to connect and get out of that awkwardness?
That boyish kind of thing. I'm thinking maybe around 18. Yeah, the girls did it, you know. Once he could actually interact with the ladies, and could begin to dress in a more manly manner, you know, started losing a little weight. That made him feel better. Yeah. Then, because he always had the articulation. Excuse me. Always had the articulation. And once he could pull the looks together and the social activity, then he began to take on his manhood. Yeah.
The Maynard that we know.
The Maynard that we know, exactly. Mind you that there was a Maynard that had taken on a great deal of manhood when my daddy died at a very young age. He readily accepted that level of responsibility. So he really did think he was the man of the family. And we respected him to a certain degree in that category. Mm-hmm.
I do have a question. When he left from BU, how was he feeling?
From BU?
From Boston University, from law
Oh,
school.
okay. How was he feeling?
Like, you know, did he feel like, okay, this is too much, I'm too far from home? You know.
I don't know that I can answer that with a lot of knowledge.
Or let's generalize it a
I
little.
know that Grandpa didn't like it.
Didn't like him being up there?
No, didn't like him leaving.
Oh, right,
People had invested money,
right.
and he blew it.
You should talk to me, Ken.
I'm sorry.
People had invested
People
money.
had invested money, and he blew it.
You need, I'm sorry. You need the context of that.
I'm not gonna
okay,
worry about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and then,
I'll watch the
so,
camera.
so can, do you remember him having any discussions with you about feeling, you know, vexed about let everybody down and how he moved forward to do so well at NCCU?
I don't remember him, Buzzy, having sessions with me about that. He probably did, but I do remember him. Well, I remember him saying that he just especially hated letting Grandpa down because his money was involved.
When he was at Boston University?
Yeah, and mothers forgive you everything, so I don't think that was a big worry. Yeah.
Getting back to finding his, manhood swagger, if you will. It seems like maybe that was around the time when he went to University of NCCU Central. And you remember those days around when he met my mom and everything?
Yeah. When I met Buddy,
Mhm.
yeah, sure.
Can you
What do you remember about
reflect
those
on that a
days?
little bit?
I know that he was crazy about Bunny. He went to North Carolina Central University. My mother was teaching there at the time, so it was it was understandable that he would attend there because he could go tuition free. And by then, you know, it was on her. So they had to take advantage of that opportunity. And I remember Maynard meeting Bunny there, and they're dating in Durham. Looked serious, was serious, ended up serious, yeah. So, and I liked Bunny for Maynard. I thought they were compatible. Wanna know why?
Why?
Because Bunny was not an aggressive woman. Or Bunny was a smart woman who didn't come off as aggressive. One or the other. Because certainly nowadays, when she has had to raise a family by herself, she has her own business that she carries on, she has a definite aggression about life. But back then, I just think Bunny was real slick and knew how to catch Maynard. Because she was a purry little kitty. That's not her personality. But that's what Maynard liked. And it just, boom, knocked him over just like that.
It's like that.
Yeah, just like that. I ain't kidding. She just curled up and he just laid there.
Can you just, I just need you to say, when he went to Boston University, the family was upset that he didn't finish.
No. Okay, when he went to Boston University, the family was upset that he didn't finish. But at least he went on and did something. I mean, he didn't just leave it there, you know.
Okay, good. Anything else?
I'm satisfied. Cause
I think we need to balance it, as well, because she's still his sister. What about when he first met Valerie?
Yeah, you remember that?
Do you remember that?
Of course I remember. Did you see me say
Talk to
anything?
camera.
Because it draws a comparison. I didn't want to do that.
I think
What cause?
I think that's a good idea.
what?
All right.
I don't think, I don't think she should do that.
Yeah, I don't see a need to.
Yeah.
We talking about his Durham days.
Yeah.
Valerie wasn't in the picture then.
Exactly.
No.
Tell them the Superman story or the baseball bat story.
Oh God. What is the baseball bat story called?
He swung and hit you by accident.
Oh yes. Can you see a scar in my forehead right
Yeah, I
there?
see
That's
it.
my Maynard scar. He was playing with his buddies. They played straight base back then, baseball, but you only had two bases, running back and forth. I was making mud pies behind first base. Just as I stood up, Maynard swung the bat backwards and hit me in my forehead. And of course, blood gushed everywhere, and they ran me to the doctor, and he was feeling pretty bad about it, but it was just an accident. Of course, he didn't do it on purpose. But that's my Maynard scar. Yeah.
And what's the Superman story?
Lord help him. One time, I had made Maynard this Superman cape. I handmade it. It was blue with the red and yellow diagram, you know, the emblem on it. And it had a cloth string that pulled like this. And he could put it on and play Superman. Well, my mama came out on the porch one day, on the balcony. This was at the house. No, I've got this story mixed up. Wait a minute.
Jumped off the roof.
Yeah, but where were we? In Dallas? I didn't make that outfit if we were in Dallas. Anyway, we were in Dallas, Texas. So I was a little girl. Maynard was right above me. He got a a Superman suit from somewhere. I guess Mom and Daddy bought it for Christmas. And he stood up there on the edge. We had a balcony on that house, on a second floor, full, tall, big balcony. And he stood up on the edge and was getting ready to jump off like this because he was Superman. And my mother and grandmother came out there and quietly got him down and inside. My mother kept saying, don't rush him, don't excite him or jump him, because he might just chew, you know. But they got him down, but he took that very literally. And I always make the analogy between that and what he really did in life. I mean, he did a lot of Superman stuff in life, to me. As a young, real young black man. And to do the things he did, to walk into that city, take it, and create so many wonders and so much progress. I could call that his Superman stuff.
Great. Beautiful story.
I think that's a great rap.
Yeah. What is that?
Just curious, because they said in interviews they mentioned Maynard was not into sports,
Right.
and you're the first person to say he was playing baseball, but he hit you. Do you think that had anything to do with his? And you would have to answer.
He played straight base. Straight base is not. He played straight base. Straight base is not a legitimate sport. You're not out there on the field, you know, and endangering yourself as in most sports, you know. This was just one little brick there, one little brick there, and you hit the ball. And this was like kitty bats, you know. Nothing I would call a legitimate sport. When Maynard was in college, he was not indulged in any sports. He just didn't do sports. He tried to run track. Oh, Lord, it was pitiful. He couldn't do it. He was too heavy. Maynard was chunky, even up through Morehouse. And he tried to run track and everything when he was in Morehouse and couldn't do it. He wanted sports badly because that was an attraction to the women. Yeah.
Didn't he try football for a second there at Normal?
He may have tried out, Buzzy. I don't remember. He didn't do it. I can promise you Maynard did not play no football. If he did, if he played football, I don't remember. Do you remember tales of him playing football?
Well, there's tales of him playing like for, I don't know, maybe not a full year, but they say he was number 70.
At Morehouse?
You mentioned that he played football.
At Morehouse?
Yes, yes.
All right.
I don't remember it. I'm not saying he didn't do it.
Yeah.
All right, let's get room tone.
Daphne?
Quiet.
Daphne?
Okay, Nick, the editor, we're going for 30 seconds of June determined, starting at time code 10:44, 04, 05, 06. Thank you.
Daphne?
We're done.
Who is Daphne? Why do you all laugh